The rewind spring pulls the starter rope back into the starter when starting the engine. After years of use, the spring will wear and eventually break. The spring will typically break at one of its ends, where it attaches to the pulley or to the housing. This wear can be accelerated by using excessive force when pulling on the starter rope, or if the starter rope is routinely pulled out to its full length. When the spring breaks, it won't retract the rope back into the starter. Replacing the spring is a repair that you can do yourself, and I'm going to show you how.
Hi, I'm Mark Socha.
Do-it-yourself repairs like these are easier than you might think. From lawn machines to cordless drills, kitchen mixers,
Outdoor grills.
our how-to videos walk you through each repair from start to finish. So doing it yourself means never having to do it alone.
Let's get started.
I'll begin by removing the upper shaft from the motor housing. Now remove the rear engine cover. Now remove the ignition switch. Now remove the starter housing. First I'll remove the 4 screws that secure the housing to the engine. And then the 4 screws that secure the recoil starter to the housing itself. I'll also remove the throttle cable from the carburetor. Now remove the handle from the starter rope. And I allow the rope to recoil back into the starter. Now remove the clutch. I'll use a clutch removal tool. I place the tool on the 2 ears on either side of the clutch, and then I'll use my impact wrench to remove it. Now I can remove the starter assembly from the engine shaft. Now I'll remove the starter pulley. And I can remove the spring assembly from the housing. Now I can install the new starter spring. It installs with the spring facing down against the housing. I align the ear on the spring with the knob on the starter housing. Now I'll place the starter pulley back onto the spring, making sure that the spring tab aligns with the opening in the housing. And I'll resecure the pulley with the metal tabs and screws. Now I need to apply a small amount of tension to the pulley spring. To do that, I'll rotate the pulley clockwise, about 1 full turn. As I rotate it, I'll work the rope around the plastic posts. When finished, the rope should extend out between these 2 posts. This plastic piece indicates the bottom of the starter. Now I'll pull out several inches of rope, thread it through the eyelet on the starter housing, and reinstall the handle. Now I can reinstall the starter assembly onto the engine shaft. Again, I'll pull some rope out from the pulley. I'll install the pulley onto the shaft so that the notched portion of the pulley aligns with the pawls. Then I can reinstall the large flat washer and the clutch. Now I can reinstall the starter housing onto the engine. As I do this, I need to keep in mind that this tab with the hole in it indicates the bottom of the starter assembly. So I'll rotate that around, keeping it as close to the bottom as possible, and then slide the housing over the engine. As I work the housing into place, again I need to align that starter assembly with the housing. To do that, I use a punch. I'll rotate the starter around until I locate that hole on the plastic tab. Once I locate the hole, I'll place the punch in it, and that'll keep it aligned with the housing. Now it's just a matter of working the housing around until it aligns with the engine and slides into place. Once in place, I'll install 2 of the screws that secure the housing to the engine just to keep things aligned. Now I'll install the 4 screws that secure the starter assembly to the housing. With 2 of the screws installed, I can remove the punch and install the other 2. And now the last 2 screws that secure the housing to the engine. Now I'll reinstall the switch. I'll use a hook to pull the ignition wires out of the engine housing. And I'll reinstall the wires onto the back of the switch. Then I can press the switch back into the housing. Now I can reinstall the rear cover. Now reinstall the shaft to the engine. I'll replace the spring over the cable, align the shaft with the housing, and insert it back in. Once it gets to this point, I need to align the cable with the fitting on the clutch. To do that, I'll rotate the trimmer head as I push the shaft back into the housing. Once it's aligned, I'll resecure it with the anti-rotation screw and the clamp screw. And I'll reattach the throttle cable to the carburetor. And now you know how to install a new starter spring on your small engine. Be sure to check back often for new videos and expert advice. If you found this video helpful, give us a thumbs up
And leave a comment.